had any urgent business that I'm aware of anyway, which is great. I'd like to start the meeting by reading a script. Good evening. It's a little past 7:30, so we're going to open the meeting of the Board of Health, which is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID virus, the Board of Selectmen has suspended all public gatherings, and in accordance with the Governor's order, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The Governor's order allows public bodies to meet remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations and or board committee votes of the meeting. We do anticipate offering opportunities for public comment. They usually would come after an item has been introduced and discussed. And typically I would ask the moderator, which is Cheryl, to see if anyone has requested the opportunity to comment. Please note the meeting is being recorded and that most attendees are attending by video conference. So please be aware that people may be able to see you, and anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. So I will introduce each speaker on the agenda, and after they conclude their remarks, I will go down the list of members, inviting each by name to provide comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment. And that's pretty much it. So with that, we'll open with the first item on the agenda, which is Cheryl, and I hesitate to try my video one more time, but you know, and well, let's try it one more time. Cheryl, would you mind bringing us up to date, please? Cheryl?
Sure. So good evening, everybody. I have a few updates. Like Bill mentioned, it's been a while since we met, and I've been providing you with email updates as well as placing that update on DocuShare. So I got a couple things. Today we received notification from the state with an updated guidance that basically is telling people to, if they have any complaints about the businesses that are currently open, to reach out to boards of health and potentially the Department of Labor standards. So that's something new that we got today. I mean, I feel like most of the complaints are being received by us anyways, but we'll see if the complaints to us. So with that being said, over the weekend, we got a lot of complaints about people not wearing face coverings.
Cheryl, I don't know if you can.
So I just want to required indoors and outdoors.
Cheryl, I don't know if you can hear me, but I think your internet connection is spotty. I don't know if there's any way you can move closer to your Wi-Fi port or something like that, because you're dropping in and out.
Yeah, you were for a minute there. Am I better?
No.
All right.
Is anyone else? Maybe it's just maybe it's my internet connection. Is anyone else having a problem hearing Cheryl?
Yes.
I am. Yeah.
Yes.
She's all garbled.
The problem.
Cheryl, maybe drop your video.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
No, it's about the same. We get about yeah.
All right. Let me move. Give me a minute.
All right. Sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
By the way, one item of business, I note that it looks like, uh, let's see, can I count? No, I'm wrong. I can't count. We have a full board. Never mind. Uh-oh.
Did we lose Cheryl?
I hesitate to say that, but all of the little thumbnails just disappeared from my screen anyway.
For you?
Oh,
Me too.
Yes.
I still see her name.
I'm still
Oh.
here. Do you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, much better.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I'll start over then. So the state sent us updated guidance today that speaks to any complaints that our residents may have regarding any of the open businesses. So they've updated the guidance to include that complaints come directly to the health departments, and they've also identified the Department of Labor standards for anybody else that they wish to complain to somebody else. So the Department of Labor and Standards say they take about 72 hours to get back to people, and I feel like we're doing that within a couple hours, including the weekend. So if people have complaints, they should definitely reach out to us. So with that being said, this weekend we did receive a lot of complaints, and mostly for like maybe one person in particular not wearing a face covering in a restaurant. So the face covering order that the governor placed on says that if you must wear a face covering if you're indoors or outdoors, and if you're unable to or maintain a distance of 6 feet. So if you're able to maintain a distance of 6 feet, face coverings aren't required per the order. They shall cover the nose and mouth, which we've all talked about before. And then there's also an exception where a person is unable to wear a mask or a face covering due to medical conditions. And they're not, and I want to just be clear that they're not required to produce any documentation to anybody asking. So then, in addition to that, businesses can also create their own policies that can decline entry to any individual. And then there's also a fine provision of $300 per violation. So I'm bringing this up because we did receive quite a few complaints this weekend about this. And I was looking for some board guidance on, my thought was maybe get some signs for the businesses, which we've sent to them already, but maybe signs now that speak to a fine, also speak to their ability to deny someone entrance. There is a lot of talk with that, where if you go into an establishment and you've got 16, 17, 18-year-old students working in the establishment, it's really difficult for them to tell someone to wear a mask. So I'm thinking maybe with a sign and the threat of a fine, maybe that can help quite a bit. Now, one thing we don't know with these complaints is if they're because a person has a medical condition. So, or if they were able to maintain the 6 feet in distance. So I just wanted to bring that up because we seem to be inundated with those, and I was definitely looking for some board guidance. Do you want me to continue, or do you want to address?
Well, why don't we just take a short sense of the board? Does anyone have a suggestion to offer? Cheryl, it sounds like this is another, case where, we need to make Solomon-like decisions in on the spot, and there probably is no universal answer. But if anyone has some thoughts they'd care to share, please jump in. I lost the little grid that showed who who was online, so I can't tell if anyone has unmuted themselves to speak. So just please go ahead.
Hey, Bill, it's Mike.
Hello, Mike.
So actually, I had a question about like the fines. Who can actually like write write up a fine for someone? Is that the police, health department? Can Board of Health members write up fines?
I'll attempt an answer, although Cheryl probably has the official answer.
No, you go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think the answer is all of the above. It's a civil infraction, I believe, and it is to a Board of Health regulation. So all Board of Health members are actually Board of Health agents, which means that you can, in fact, issue civil infraction notices of civil infractions, as can any sworn officer. So that would be police officers and constables, and of course members of the health department because they're all health agents, appointed health agents. So I think the answer is actually all of the above.
Oh, how do we like? I noticed I went to the farmers market and saw some violations there, and like I'm wondering, you know, would it be like a you know fine pad that I could write people up? I mean, not that I would, but just logistically, how would that happen?
So I believe, and again, now I really need Cheryl's help, but I believe there is, effectively a ticket book. And like I said, I don't, in the time that we've been doing the Board of Health, I can't think of a case where members have actually issued citations. I know members have called for staff to come and assist, but I mean, I guess you could be given a ticket book. Cheryl, help.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would like the ability to fine, and any assistance would be appreciated. But I also, feel like, I feel like we've been doing a good job educating. But maybe more needs to be done, and that's kind of why I was thinking the signage first. It's not like I want to find people. I would like compliance. That's all.
Yeah, Bill, I think like if there's any like motion that needs to be made to allow Cheryl and her team to find people, I'd be happy to make it. But yeah, anything we can do to get more compliance, I'm good with that.
So I'll just offer the suggestion. I mean, I appreciate that, Mike, but I don't think any motion is necessary. There are already Board of Health agents. We already have that as a rule, Board of Health regulation, and part of the state of emergency, which is both a state and local, uh, regulation. So I believe they're fully empowered to issue, citations if they need to. Do you disagree, Cheryl?
No, I agree.
So it's just a case of, have things progressed to that point, and that's where I was saying at the beginning, it's kind of difficult to know, when do we need to drop the hammer and when do we need to be more persuasive, and that's a difficult. It's kind of a case by case basis, I think, right? I mean, previously the board had that situation with folks breaking quarantine, and kind of our bright line, I would say, was open defiance. If people were aware of the rules, understood the rules, and simply refused to regard follow the rules, then we needed to get a little more heavy-handed. And I would suggest that maybe that's the same approach we should take in this case, right? If folks are not following proper etiquette, if they're told and they say, oops, sorry, then well, you've achieved your goal, which is compliance. If they go, I'm not doing no darn mask, then maybe they should be handed the ticket. Suggestion.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the goal is compliance. So, I mean, obviously, more education, the signage, the businesses being aware that they can have that additional restriction. I think it's what the police did when the initial with the face masks, so having ones to pass out to folks in case they forgot one, or a nice token would be a suggestion. But if you're going to, we've seen too many cases across the country where people are trying to self-enforce, and that probably is not a prudent decision. So, involving those who are professionals like the police and, that civil matter would be a lot better. In all our years, we haven't had to issue tickets. I think it's better to have a third party, the agent or the police come in and do those type of details would be best.
Okay. Well, other comments from other members? And I figured out how to bring up the list of attendees. I still can't see your pictures, but
How'd you do that?
down at the bottom it says participants. I clicked on that, and then I clicked on panelists.
There we are. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Good evening,
Great.
Ms. Becerra.
Hi. So I have a sort of a logistical question, and if it's a situation similar to what was cited of a customer within an establishment not wearing a mask or refusing to wear a mask, who would give that person a ticket? I mean, by the time somebody arrived at the place of business, the person's probably gone. So it's just a hypothetical, and maybe it's not a big deal, but I was just wondering if that's something
Yeah,
that
I mean,
in real time can be done, or whether it's just an unpleasant exchange between the business owner and the customer.
well, it's probably a little bit of an unpleasant exchange, but I hate to say this, but nowadays most people pay by credit card, so it's
Oh, right.
it's usually easy enough to figure out who it is, and
Sneaky. All right.
and maybe they get a phone call from somebody from the Acton Police Department that says there's been a complaint lodged, and they need to change their behavior. Usually that's that sort of like, well, consider this your warning.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps that would be persuasive.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Or
Mr. Thom, I would ask Cheryl what happened to the complaints that you did get.
So we reached out to the managers and reinforced the policies and the face covering orders. That's all we've done at this point. Like I said, I think additional signs provided to them will probably be helpful. And we have everybody's email, so it's pretty easy to give them the guidance electronically, and that we can send that to them as soon as tomorrow morning. So it's helpful, and I think they appreciate us, helping them. But I do think that there are going to be some policing issues, but as Bill suggested, we can get the police to help us. So
okay. Well, if there's no further comments from members of the board, then Cheryl, please continue.
So the other issue I wanted to discuss was effective today. The governor lifted the plastic bag ban. So now plastic bags can no longer be used in Acton and any other community that has the ban. So we sent out notification this morning to ensure that our businesses are aware of that. So hopefully it's a non-issue and they remove their plastic bags from their shelves. I know when we had discussed this previously with all of you, it was your inclination to have the selectmen give them a period of time to be able to make that transition, but the selectmen did not approve that. Their vote was that once the plastic bag ban is rescinded by the governor, then it would go into effect. So that happened today. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that. And then, I sent you guidance on, we're currently in phase 3, step 1. So this past few weeks that we haven't met, we have been like continually reaching out to any new business, ensuring that those safety protocols are being followed by the governor. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Questions or comments from members of the board?
Cheryl, have they accepted, what do they call it? The bags you bring in? Is that allowable now, or is that still banned? Reusable bags.
You know, that's a good question, Bill. I couldn't find anything on that, so I have to look into that a little bit further.
Yeah, I think the governor said he allowed it, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything in writing. I looked and I
Okay.
couldn't find it. So let me look into that further, and I can update you guys on that.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? In that case, I'll ask Cheryl, is any questions or comments from members of the public?
There is one person with their hand raised. See if I can. Diane, you can go ahead and talk. Please state your name and address.
Hello? You need to unmute yourself. Yeah, okay. I think I saw you unmute for about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
There you go. Ma'am,
Actually,
you're,
I don't have a question. I was just wondering why the chat has been disabled on the meeting.
What was been disabled?
The chat function has been disabled this meeting and the last meeting, which was quite a while ago, back in June. So you can't write a comment in from home anymore.
oh,
Huh.
don't know.
I didn't do anything with that, but we can make sure that gets lifted. I think I might have IT on the call, or I did. Let me see if I can get someone to do that for this meeting. Thank you for bringing that to our
Thank you.
attention.
Any other questions or comments from members of the public? By the way, I just, ma'am, I just went down my participant list and I see a chat button up here next to people's name. Matter of fact, let's see if I can chat with you. I think I can. So it might be, well, if I can't spell, but it might be, yes, and Mike just sent me a chat message. So, ma'am, I believe it's actually, it is operable. So,
It might just be operable to panelists.
well, I just tried to send one to
You sent
Diana.
it to panel. Oh, do you see her name?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
I don't know either, but I'll look into it.
Okay. Well, like I say, there are certain challenges for this particular format. Okay, well, in that case, shall we move on to the other portion of the agenda, which is the, Cheryl, I believe you're also going to take the place of Heather tonight. Is that true?
Correct. I have a real quick update. Heather is, taking some much needed time off. So she asked me just to give you an updated number. So they haven't changed since Friday. So currently we're at 178 cumulative cases, 5 currently in isolation, 152 recovered, and unfortunately 21 fatalities. Since pretty much the end of June, Massachusetts in general has been fairly flatlined. Or Acton in general. I mean, not Massachusetts. We've been pretty flatlined, and we did have a little bump. Last week we went from 3 to 2. So, and we've been maintaining at that total of 5. So we're fairly flatlined, and I'm hoping it stays that way. That's all I
Okay.
have.
All right. Questions or comments for Heather, also known as Cheryl, tonight? All right. Well, in that case, if there's no questions or comments, thank goodness we're getting a bit of a pause. I mean, obviously, I'm sure all members of the public have seen what's been going on throughout the country, and it's particularly down in the southern portion of the country, and be great if that doesn't come our way, but it means we definitely need to continue to be mindful and practice diligence to make sure that we don't have a second wave. Cheryl, your screen just disappeared, which had the agenda on it. So
Right. So unfortunately, I'm screen sharing and trying to manage the people. So it's sorry, I had to shut that off so I could get this next one up. So right now we're on the. We had some other updates, Bill. And anything other COVID related, but I don't have anything further. I'm not sure about the rest of the board if they have any questions, but if not, the next item on the agenda was the schools.
all right. Well, in that case, could I ask that you? So I just got a post attendee message from Zoom. It thinks I've left.
Yeah, we're having some Zoom issues today, unfortunately.
Well, I can see the plan. So in that case, Cheryl, I'd ask if you would please introduce the topic. I believe the engineers may be on the line, in which case I'd ask them to speak to their proposal. And I read the agenda. I believe this is an informal discussion, right? The engineers are looking for a sense of the board. Is that your understanding?
Well, actually, the last meeting that we had with the schools, we had approved the septic tanks in a different location. So I'm pretty sure that I know that you guys gave an approval for those septic tanks. So we would be looking for an approval for this new location. So if you look on the plan, kind of about in the middle of the document, you can kind of see like an area that was where the tanks were supposed to go, which has like a circle around it. Unfortunately, when they were digging, they encountered ledge. So now they're proposing to bring the tanks all the way to the far right of the plan. And I know the engineer can speak further to this. Staff has reviewed this and sent comments to the engineer, and most of those comments have been addressed. So if the board is inclined, we would be looking for approval for this. I sent you all last minute additional conditions that we'd like to have placed on. If you'd like, I can pull that up, but I can only share one thing at a time. So if you want to look at the plan for now, and I'll pull that up after board discussion, that would be fine, if that's okay with you.
Sure, that's fine. And I remember where I saw that you're looking for an informal discussion. It was in Mr. Ventresca's letter that he wrote to the board. So if that's changed, that's fine. Just it's different than what was in the letter. So.
Yeah, no, they're definitely seeking approval for this location. And, normally the board doesn't, do an approval for this, but I would, since we've already done the approval for the other, I would recommend that the board approve this if warranted.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, next, Mr. Ventresca, can you just speak to the rationale and
Sure. For the record, Stephen Ventresca with Niche Engineering on behalf of the Acton Boxborough School District. And so, as you know, this is the project for the combined Douglas Gate School. This is on the Douglas side of the site, off of Spruce Street and Arlington Street. And initially, when we came in front of the board back in the middle of June, we discussed we requested approval for just the septic tanks, because at the time we were still working through the permitting for the septic field, which you can see off to the left. And so we had requested approval for the installation of 2 of the septic tanks, the 22,000 and the 12,000 septic tank. It was subsequently granted. And as Cheryl mentioned, when construction started, the excavation for the tanks indicated that there was ledge higher and more extensive than what was originally determined through borings. And so after some evaluation, we determined, the design team, along with the school district, determined that installing the new tanks would be easier and more cost-effective, while still providing, requirements under Title V if they were installed east of the new building, which is, as Cheryl mentioned, to the right, on the right-hand side. And Cheryl, I don't know if you can zoom in on just that location, just so we can talk through the location of the tanks and elevations, etc. But maybe not. At any rate, we're still providing the 22,000, the 12,000, and the pump chamber, which is sized at 13,000 gallons.
So, Mr. Ventris, this is
Sure.
Bill. I apologize for jumping in,
No.
but I think one of the distinctions between the old location and the new location is the aquifer zone that they're located in. You're going.
Yep, that's
4 to 3,
correct.
right?
And so that's correct. And so as you can see, there's that dashed line that kind of swoops through the center of the plan here. So anything to the south or below that line is aquifer protection zone 4, and anything above that line is aquifer protection 3. So you are correct. The location now moves the tanks from a zone 4 to a zone 3. That is something that can be done, obviously with board approval. The current system does have tanks and the SAS field, which is the soil absorption field, in a zone 3. The project, while we have the tanks in a zone 3, does move the entire field to a zone 4, and then elevates that above the estimated seasonal high groundwater and the mounding to 5 feet above that. So we're providing additional protections by the disposal of the septic system in the zone 4. In addition, the tanks that we're looking at, as stated in the letter, are shallower but longer, which allows us to avoid or minimally go into the ledge at the location on the east side. So we did. We are requesting approval tonight. I think initially when the letter was sent, we were looking for a discussion, but subsequent discussions and back and forth with comments with Evan in the office, we are looking for approval to relocate these tanks on the east side, which would be the future loading area for the new twin school. So we did receive the conditions that Cheryl sent just before the hearing. We can certainly meet those requirements. I think one of them was the actual physical installation of a barrier between the tanks and the resource area, which is to the right or to the east on this plan. And then there were other requests for during construction, maintaining the integrity of the tanks in the system. Just another item to point out for the tanks, because of this location and because of the ability to route the sewer or the effluent through the building, we're able to maintain a higher elevation as we exit the building, which allows us to be about 2 feet higher above groundwater than we were originally if we were installing the tanks in the cul-de-sac. So it's an improved layout, it's an improved design. It does go into the zone 3, but again, we feel that we meet the requirements of Title V. We're looking at the best interest of maintaining make sure the tanks are watertight as they would need to be under Title V, proper testing for the tanks going to full service, and especially with the leach field as well. So we are requesting approval of the tanks to be relocated to the east of the proposed building.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
I think you answered actually one of my questions, which was, obviously aquifer protection is a concern if there's leakage,
Yep.
but I believe you said that there would be, absent, catastrophic failure, there wouldn't be an opportunity for leakage, that all of the pipes and connections are sealed for all of the things that are installed in Zone 3. Is that is that understanding correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So, I mean, the tanks that we're installing will have waterproofing installed on the insides of the tanks, and then the tanks will be water tested for 24 hours to make sure that they are watertight. And the pipe connections to the tanks will have the waterproof boots on either end to prevent water intrusion, which is standard practice these days. And so that would be implemented on this for these tanks and for this installation.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions from members of the board?
Hi, Bill.
Yeah, this is Bill Taylor. I just had one. So the distance between the septic tanks and the leaching field is now 5 times longer. Is that correct?
It's I don't know if it's 5 times longer. Let's just say it's a little bit over 2 times the distance that was originally proposed, maybe 3 times when you look at it.
Now,
And so that would just require slightly larger pumps to move the effluent up to this to the new septic field.
and does that introduce more risk to the project?
It does not introduce more risk to the project. It does not. It just involves increasing the horsepower of the pumps.
Okay.
So we'd still have the force mains would still be scheduled 40 PVC, installed with appropriate bonding between the joints, waterproof joints, so that we would continue that installation process.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Conaby, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I guess I had a couple of questions, starting with the letter. It said that your project team determined relocating the tank in the zone 4 was not possible. Maybe you could explain a little bit about that? It wasn't too clear from the letter.
No, I think it's based on the extent of the ledge that was found in the location where we wanted to install the tanks.
In a certain location, I understand, but
Yeah.
what about the location? I'll call it the parking lot, for lack of a different description, on the northwest quadrant above on the plan, the SAS. I mean, that obviously would be another area. What was the reasoning why you didn't select that area?
We didn't select that area because we're starting to get close to the wetland buffer zone. In addition, we're looking to use portions of the parking lot as porous pavement. So we understand that we need to be sensitive to that and stay away from that. I believe there's a 100-foot offset to the SAS, and then there's and then typical 50-foot, 25-foot offsets for tanks. We just start to run out of room if we started to look at the parking lot with other program space that we're looking to provide in the parking lot area. We start to run out of room.
So it was possible
And then
zone 4, but you're saying you wanted to maintain the pervious pavement for recharge in that area. Is that correct?
that's correct.
So obviously, it's preferable to keep it in the zone 4 rather than zone 3.
No, which if it was possible, we would of course look to do that, but based on getting gravity flows, which is from the far sides of the building. If we were in the parking lot, we would be even deeper. And we do know that the ledge continues out as you head down towards the wetland. And so based on resource areas, ledge elevation, the site to the east of the new building was the most beneficial cost-wise, and also for allowing us to maintain the tank elevations.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it goes downhill, so that helps for the gravity.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I guess my concern is, have you thought about, that's a long distance from the existing building for a couple of years. Have you thought about whether it makes any sense to split? You said there was going to be 2 connections coming out of the building the last time to split the tanks, or is that more an issue? It's easier to stay with one connection.
It's easier to stay with one connection. The internal plumbing to the building falls under plumbing code, as you know. But allows us to, I think, providing that one connection, easier for maintenance, easier if there's ever, for some reason, there's an issue that needs to be tracked down. It's a single location to investigate instead of multiple locations.
Yeah, and obviously you're planning on sleeving it and going 10 feet beyond the building before you transition to the tanks?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so basically, at this point, the ledge is a concern. I guess I'll bring up my secondary concern. If you found ledge that close to where the SAS is proposed, And seeing all the boulders on site and the other ledge, what makes you think that there's no ledge where the SAS is going to be? Not gonna
Well,
have a problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. We do know that there is ledge there, and based on the test pits that we did with Evan, that was witnessed by Evan.
Mhm.
So based on our understanding of the ledge and understanding of the requirements under the Acton Aquifer Protection and the your zoning bylaws for the Board of Health, we do understand that we need to be above that, and we'll be well above that. The top of this system will be approximately 10 feet higher than the existing parking lot grade right now, which allows us to be completely above the ledge. Allows us to have that 4 feet of naturally occurring material, and then on top of that, we're going to have another 4 to 5 feet of Title V sand. So we'll be well above the ledge at this point for the new SAS field.
I was just thinking that since you're under a tight time frame, getting a little bit better handle, you have the big equipment on site with nobody there, maybe doing a few more exploratory things just so there's no more surprises might be a prudent thing.
Yeah, I think based on the current excavations that have been ongoing, I don't know if there are. Well, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. As far as I know, as of right now, there are no more surprises in this area that we're aware of.
We hope not, but ledge is kind of hidden, as we should say.
Right, exactly.
All right, getting back to the location up next to the new building, you said it's going to be right near the primary loading area. I have a lot of concerns. That's going to be really the major egress means into the building for a lot of the supplies, a lot of the trucks, traffics, and things. So I think that's why the condition of having some sort of barrier and plates and things, just because things like cranes and drilling rigs and stuff really they're more than H20 loading, so it could be a real problem.
Right. My understanding, based on discussions with the construction manager, is that the crane setup will be actually behind the new building, so it'll be in that area where the V is between the two wings, approximately, and that's where most of the picks will occur on that location. Understanding, yes, that is an access point for deliverables. Actually, there's a window in front of the plan, but if you look at the on that right side, there is, yeah. If you look on the right side, though, there is an area just off of that where we show the loading area right now, but that is actually going to be the location for more of the truck traffic and construction traffic as soon as the notice of intent is complete, and so we'll be coming in that way. And then, as far as during the operation of the school, we understand that there's a smaller vehicle that will be making deliveries based on our discussion with the school district, and those usually are once a day. More of a box truck than the typical 55 or so long foot tractor trailers that maybe we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to have, that's going to be the primary area. So we want to look at, I think, everything from fire trucks going around the building and the delivery. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the tanks that we specify and that we detail out are definitely H20 loaded, and we meet the Title V requirements where we have at least 2 to 3 feet of cover. We can't go beyond the 3 feet, but we make sure that the tanks are appropriately or structurally appropriate for the H20 loading and for the loads that will be seen here.
Okay, that's just a huge concern. How close are the tanks to where the new building footings and things will be for excavation?
So we're going to be 10 feet away from those.
Yeah.
I think maybe it shows a little bit closer, but we try to do a minimum 10 feet from footings or face a building.
That's very close to this larger building. I'm just concerned about, is there any way to stage it appropriately so you don't wind up undercutting and underdigging these?
Yeah, it does become a sequencing. I think, when the tanks go in, my understanding is that the foundation work will be ongoing concurrently. So there is an opportunity to do both at once, if you will.
Yeah.
And there's a phasing on that. This is not uncommon from other projects that I've worked on where the tanks are close to the building like this in a tight configuration. And they've been able to, the contractors are savvy enough to understand that, they want to get in there once and then they want to get out. They don't want to go back again.
No, it's with a tight time frame and a difficult site. We certainly do it right the first time.
Exactly.
The conditions, you're obviously much closer to the wetland and other resource areas. Is there any concerns with the Conservation Commission regarding this location and activities?
We have not completely discussed this with conservation. This has just come about in the past week or two at the most. And so as we're still within discussions with conservation. We did have the hearing on July 1st. And so we're still having discussions with them. We're actually going to have a continued hearing on the 15th. And so we will have discussions with them and make sure that they understand that the tanks are looking to relocate them here, and any concerns they have on top of what you have, we can address them.
Right. So I think we've covered some of the construction as far as the plates and staking and trying to protect it during the construction and inspecting it afterwards. You mentioned waterproof in the inside. I presume you're going to waterproof the exterior of these tanks as well?
And the exterior gets waterproofed as well. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned the inside about.
No,
Just double checking. It's their protocol. I presume that you were going to call
correct.
And then the poly barrier and the monitoring wells, you guys, there was no concern about that as an additional requirement.
No, the poly barrier not an issue, and then the monitoring wells. I believe you're just referring to the monitoring wells at the SAS field at the bottom of the slope there.
Well,
let me see.
But Evan's memo on item 3, monitoring wells must be installed between the septic tanks and the nearby wetlands.
Protection plan for maintaining against. I'm sorry, number 3, add new condition that a safety and protection plan for maintaining and protecting the tanks and septic systems.
There was a memo to the board from the health department from Evan, and that was dated July 9th in our pamphlet. And in it, the health department recommended relocation approval subject to the additional conditions. Basically, revised plan, water tightness tests, all the other conditions except for zone 4. And then the third condition is listed as monitoring wells must be installed between the tank and the nearby wetlands. So.
Oh, okay. I didn't. I apologize. I did not see that. I received a different set of conditions.
Yeah, I think there was a subsequent one today, just as people were trying to review it.
Oh, okay.
Regarding the concern about the proximity to the resource areas, whether putting the poly barrier in, which is typically the Conservation Commission in the standard condition, and then the additional conditions about the construction protection safety plan by the department, which would include things like concrete jersey barriers and stuff, just to protect the things during the construction and the prior requirement that they inspected and videoed prior to the certificate of occupancy.
Which and I believe we had that from the previous. So we'll carry that forward. So and we can certainly add those monitoring wells.
That was required, and it's a prudent thing. And it would obviously be different than the SAS monitoring wells, which would be for effluent water quality. I'm presuming that just fairly superficial wells, just for water quality for breakout or something like that.
Right. Yeah, we can certainly add those.
Yeah. And the other thing, I didn't see any like, grease trap or things because you're gonna be close to the kitchen. So yeah, we had some more things going in, unfortunately.
Yeah, we do, and so we will be including a grease trap, and that's going to be part of the entire package. So for tonight, it's looking for the tank siting or relocation approval, and then we'll come back with a full plan set that will show the grease trap, etc.
All right, and it'll show the revised location and details and all the other things.
Correct. That's correct.
This is just a variant. A change for the variance for the allowance of the septic tanks only from the prior approval with the revised conditions based on the revised information and location.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Conaby. And Dr. Taylor, I just want to make sure, I apologize. I may have cut you off. Did you get a chance to ask all your questions?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, good. Does any other members have questions or comments for either the department or the engineering firm? Mr. Cruz, I see you unmuted.
I did, Bill. And Mark, you beat me to it. I was going to ask about why not take some space out of the parking lot. And I didn't hear a good response regarding why that wasn't possible, other than you didn't want to reduce the allowable cars that could park.
Actually, it's more about the drainage because we're looking to do porous pavement, and so we need to maintain the separations between the septic and the drainage.
Well,
Putting
sure,
the
but
tank.
you could reduce the parking area, and that would alleviate the concern. No?
Not necessarily, because we still one, we want to maximize the parking for the school, and two, we want to make sure that we do know that there's ledge there now that we've excavated, and so we would be back to the same position where we are now, in that we would be needing to remove an extensive amount of ledge.
Yeah.
And so with moving the tanks to the east side, that reduces that and almost eliminates it.
Yeah. So let's get back to the ledge, and like, what's the problem with like removing the ledge and putting in the tank where it was?
So if we continue to put the tanks in the cul-de-sac there, we're talking about an 8 to 10 foot depth of ledge removal.
Okay.
Just for the tanks.
Yeah.
And over an extensive area of at least 50 by 50.
Yeah.
If we move the tanks to the east side, we're talking maybe a foot of ledge removal, if that.
Okay. So what's wrong with removing ledge?
Removing ledge is expensive and time consuming.
Okay. So this is, essentially this is cost based, not public health based.
It's cost based, of course, but we also are meeting Title V requirements, so it's not like we're doing anything less than we would if we were in a Zone 2 or a Zone 1. We're providing the Title V, and I believe also your bylaw requirements for, in addition, adding in the conditions.
Yeah, I guess my concern is like that. It seems like this project is getting kind of rushed through, and from my perspective, we had like a original plan. We provided comments. Now it's coming back for more changes, and I'm not really comfortable with the process here. I don't think you guys, honestly, I don't think you guys have done a proper job planning for this. That's just my feedback, because this should have been known, honestly.
And it's difficult with construction sometimes, because yes, you are on a schedule and you're trying to do the best design that you can given the information that you have. So
yeah,
which is what we're doing. Like, and so
bores on where the tanks should have gone. This is maybe kind of a moot point, because this project is going to get like pushed through, but I don't know what to say. I'm not really comfortable with the process here.
I guess this is the process that we need to do, and this is the process that's allowed under your bylaws, and this is what we have had extensive discussions with the board, starting with the flow variance through last year, and we've been upfront, and we've been as transparent as we can be with the agent and with the board in our discussions. I don't believe that we're trying to minimize and understand that the where we are in the town, and the town of Acton, concerns that you have for your act for protection zones. I believe that we're being sensitive to that, and we're trying to meet the requirements, and we're meeting the requirements that you have, Title V requirements, providing information that you're requesting and have that your
I hear
office
you,
has
but you're
requested.
still moving these tanks from a zone 4 to zone 3, and I'm very familiar with that site, and it's really close to the brook there.
Yeah, and I will say, as I mentioned before, with this relocation of the tanks, we are able to raise the tanks higher so that we're that much higher above groundwater, thus minimizing any potential chance of leakage or contamination.
So I'll just offer that, this is a classic case where, I guess you could say we earn our money. We have to make a judgment as to, how much environmental protection is worth how much in terms of delay and cost. And that's the two levels of criteria that we use for variances. And I believe actually there is a variance to place these tanks in a zone 3. So it would be part of an approval. And there are two standards: are manifest injustice and equal environmental protection. So I think, just from what I've heard, I think we're probably pretty close on the equal environmental protection. The question is it unfair or unjust to require full compliance when there are alternatives available, and do we think that that's a reasonable trade to make? And that's kind of the position we're in.
Yeah, Bill, I guess to that point, what would it cost to put it in the approved location right now?
Well, they gave us an estimate, I think, of $500,000. Is that, Mr.
As a minimum, correct.
And another, I apologize, but I thought it was several months delay. Was that also correct?
Correct. That's correct.
But you know how they get rid of ledge, Mike, is dynamite. So
I know.
The blasting involved, or the more noisy whole ram and.
Yeah. So, like I say, this is a case where we have to apply our judgment.
Yeah, I get it, but it's one of these things, like, I'm not sure we would have given the approval to begin with if we knew about this ledge issue. Do you know what I'm saying? And like, to Mark's point, what are we going to do 2 or 3 months from now when the SAS, they find out that there's ledge that prevents it to be installed where it is?
Well, with all due respect, we're going to be 8-9 feet above that ledge. Ledge is not a concern for the SAS.
Okay.
Bill?
Yes, Mark.
Mike brings a lot of great points, and I think one of the points is, this has been known to be a tight site, difficult soils, a difficult system for over 2 years. And a year ago, it's like, make sure you plan early and appropriately. And you can't always plan for ledge, but that's something which is, how do I phrase it, pretty obvious looking at the site where you saw the outcroppings and you see the large boulders getting bigger as you go up the hill towards the school in historical documents. But getting back to the issue of the resource area, I think we don't, because it is close, it probably would make sense to make it also approval contingent upon Conservation Commission's approval as well. Not that we shouldn't go first, but that it necessarily has to meet their approval as well.
Well, I think isn't it a given that they'd have to approve it?
Yeah, conservation is approving the entire project
Yeah,
within the resource areas.
Right. Obviously they haven't, we're just seeing it, so I presume they haven't seen all this information, or they're just seeing it. So
They're just seeing it.
So I guess my point is that I don't want to take away that their ability to put conditions on this as well. They may specifically ask for something else, and I guess I would like to make sure that that gets coordinated, since this is obviously now become a fast track design build rather than how do I phrase it, as Mike would say, planned project moving at a normal pace. So I would suggest that we just add that one thing. You're right. Obviously, you cannot build it without their approval, but I think that we ought to be cognizant of the location and the magnitude of it, and work together. I mean, on a lot of smaller ones, there's been a lot of standard rules and requirements, but this is a little bit different. I guess my other question is, what is the closest proximity of the tanks to the wetlands and the riverway, distance-wise?
In the new location.
Correct.
So let's see. We are, when you say riverway, you mean riverfront?
Yeah, 100-foot right buffer.
The 200-foot riverfront, yeah. We're in the outer riparian area, it's called. And so I'm just going to do a quick measurement here. Sorry, I did it in millimeters. So I'm going to do
Sure, let's see if we can convert.
Well, thanks.
A lot of millimeters.
a lot of millimeters. Let me.
So, by the way, Cheryl, the screen just disappeared that you were sharing.
So I reshared, put the map back up. You can't see it?
Nope. At least I can.
Okay. Give me a minute.
Okay, so the closest tank is I'm just going to round up about 36 feet to the 200-foot riverfront area.
Oh, you teased us, Cheryl.
And then
The wrong one. Sorry, I'm new with the sharing.
it's about 25 feet to the 100-foot wetland buffer.
So it's outside the 100 feet.
It's outside the 100-foot wetland buffer, correct?
Thank you.
No.
Okay, well, I'll ask if there's no other questions or comments from members of the board. Are we prepared to move on this item? Mark, I see you unmuted. Is that a sign?
It can be. It's not an ideal situation, but where it does raise it up out of the groundwater and it is being protected. It is outside the 100-foot of the wetlands. With the additional protections, it does seem like for reconstruction, it's a semi-reasonable one where $500,000 is not insignificant compared to the gargantuan budget, but it is a big number. As long as we're clear that these are additional requirements and that it is only for the septic system, hopefully we'll have a otherwise fully compliant system henceforth soon, and we can get this thing resolved.
So you make a motion to grant approval?
I would make the motion to approve the relocation to the new location, subject to the conditions of Evan's memo, plus the additional conditions that we noted, plus the Conservation Commission requirements this time.
Very good. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. We have a motion made and seconded.
Mr. Chair, just so you know, there are 5 people with their hands raised.
Oh, thank you. That's actually a very good point, Mr. Martin. I typically wait for a motion to be made so that people can comment on the motion, and I missed that opportunity. Cheryl, would you please see if comments from members of the public?
I've got them right here. So Emily Grandstaff Rice, the architect for the project, you can go first. Should be all set, Emily.
Thank you, Cheryl. Frankly, I was hoping to speak a little earlier so I could help Steve out. I've got a couple points that I just want to make, which are minor clarifications. First off, this is for the gate site. So I just want to make that clear. I think there was a misspeak in there. I want to speak a little bit too on Mr. Conapi's and Mr. Cruz's comments regarding the parking lot. one of the major issues about using the parking lot that's proposed for the new school is that's actually where the existing gate school is. So the septic system, the whole idea of having the septic system serve the existing building and then serve the new building wouldn't be able to happen because you can't physically, the existing building is there. So that's the primary reason, at least from the architect's perspective, which is what I represent. I do want to note that neither the tanks nor the leaching field are in the resource zone, and that was confirmed later in the conversation. They are both outside of the 100-foot wetland zone and also outside of the 200-foot riverfront area barrier that we look for. In terms of removing the ledge, yes, there is a large cost, and throughout the conversation, the cost did come up. I wanted to volunteer that. I also want to tell you, so in this, if there was one rig taking out that amount of ledge, it would take 80 days. If there was 2 rigs, that would be 40 days. And yes, we should try and stay in zone 4 as much as possible. But I also want to remind everyone that this is a school, and 40 days of rock being jumbled up, I can't think of a better name or word for it, so excuse me,
Sure.
right outside of a learning area is not ideal. And so we need to always remember that this is part of a school project, and the quality of life for the kids who will be going to the gate school, who will be next to the construction. And we're taking great measures to make sure that they have a quality learning environment while also being part of this larger project. I think there was a comment about this project being rushed through, and I acknowledge that. We also started this permitting process, I want to say, sort of over a year ago with some of the variances. And so I know that it feels like things are being changed. One of the issues with the bus turnaround was also the increased tank size, right? And that also increased the depth, and that made that its conflict with the ledge sort of even more apparent. So we are trying to be nimble and deal with the additional information that we're processing. So I don't want you to think that we are being fast and loose about this, but there is constantly new information that's coming in. And that's frankly the nature of construction, but also, as another person said, this is a challenging site with many different constraints, and keeping on top of those. I do want to note that the existing tanks and the leaching field are currently in zone 3. And so what's quite interesting is that this, I would actually propose, might be an improvement to the existing situation. While not ideal, where we could keep the tanks and the leaching field exclusively in zone 4, it is an improvement over the existing situation. And my final note is that in terms of the gargantuan size of this project, $500,000 does represent a little over 5% of the total project cost. So just to put that in perspective, because I'm very cognizant of the cost of this, and also sort of the town and district resources. So thank you for letting me say all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Cheryl, anyone else?
Yeah, I have Dan Jones. Dan, please state your name and your address. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can hear
Yeah,
you.
my name is Dan Jones. I'm located at 2 West Road. I just want to mention that 500,000 is 0.5% of $110 million, not 5%. So we're actually talking about a small amount of money in proportion to the total cost of this project. I really question the wisdom of moving septic tanks, 32,000 gallons of septic tanks, closer to a wetland. It doesn't seem very wise, and it seems really ill-advised and kind of last minute. And then I want to mention that these tanks will end up in a flood zone. So I received that information from another citizen, Kurt Martin, who my guess is on this call and is probably waiting to speak as well. But the tanks being placed into a flood zone seems also unwise and ill-advised. So I just don't think that this is very well thought out, and that's my comment.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Actually, if I,
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to that comment?
yeah, I was just actually about to call on you.
Yeah. So the existing flood zone is at elevation 204. If you look at the site, and I wish that Cheryl could zoom in on it. There's two demarcations on this site. One is the FEMA line, and one is the actual 204.7 elevation for the floodplain. So typically, when a FEMA map is made, it's digitized onto a much larger scaled map and not correlated to any on-the-ground survey. So there's a line that shows the FEMA line, which cuts along the right side of this plan, and then you can see the 204.7 line, which is the actual flood elevation, which shows that the flood elevation is to the east or continued right beyond where these tanks are being located. In addition, this area of the site is being lifted by approximately 4 feet, so that the finished elevation in this loading area will be at elevation 209. So we will be approximately 4 feet above flood stage, or what the existing flood elevation is for this site in this area. So we're lifting the tanks above the floodplain. We're lifting the tanks above groundwater, and then, you know, as part of the Conservation Commission filing, we are providing compensatory storage for both sites, for the Gates, which is this side, and the Douglas, which is on the other side, as required under Conservation Wetlands Protection Act, and as part of this project. So I just want to be very clear: the tanks are not in a flood zone. The tanks are not in a flood zone.
Thank you, sir. And would you mind, just for those of us that don't do this every day, when you say flood zone, is that what we would refer to as the 100-year floodplain?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl, anyone else?
There's one more, Martin. One second. Okay, Martin, if you could state your name and address.
Yes, this is Kurt Martin. I'm the property owner at 195 Arlington Street, which is downstream of Fort Pond Brook from this project. So I have a few clarifications and questions for Mr. Ventresco. So just to be clear, the total tank volume that you're proposing for this area in the dry tank volume is 47,000, and assuming that they are approximately 75% full as part of normal operation, we're talking about 35,250 gallons. Would that be reasonably accurate?
When the tanks are full, you're looking at that type of volume.
Well, I was saying 75% full. Typically, septic tanks aren't full to the brim. Is that
correct? No, that's accurate.
Yeah.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, you know, this goes back to the flow variance discussion that we had with the board a year ago. I don't want to get into it in too much detail, but you know, we did as part of the flow variance provide similar school calculations based on water consumption, showing that the water usage for the existing school and for the proposed school would be much less than what's allotted under Title V. And so, you know, while we have it, and so just to be clear with everyone, we have oversized the tanks, we have oversized the field, and we based it on Title V per the board's requirements.
I think you need to be clear that you're designing it to the required 8-gallon.
To the required 8 gallons, correct.
Yeah. So that's the new standard, which is different from what was originally designed for the existing building.
So I just
offer about the same. I just want to be clear on the record.
Yeah, no, and I remember both discussions, but I'm not sure that's where Mr. Martin's question is going.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, continue. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the letter also, you mentioned that there is a possibility for the need for a denitrification tank. What size would that be as part of this system?
So that would depend on the level of denitrification that would be required if it was found in the future to be some elevated nitrogen in the out of the SAS field. And so we had left space for approximately 2 tanks. You can see it.
on the plan, it shows there's a gap between, there's a sewer manhole and then the pump chamber, and that gap right there allows for the installation of 2 tanks, approximately between 5,000 and 7,000 gallons per tank, to provide some denitrification if that was in fact needed.
And the 7,000 gallons will be sufficient for the denitrification to be effective, as it does take a certain amount of time for that reaction to happen, that system. Is that
Again, it depends on the requirements. If there is found to be an issue, that would be determined, what that level would need to be. So these are approximate tank sizes based on our understanding of the denitrification systems currently. And so yes, like any system, it takes a while for the systems to sort of get up to speed, if you will, and provide level of treatments that would be required if there was an issue.
Okay, so this would not be a final design then, is that what if I understand you correctly, because you don't know yet?
Well, this is a final design based on Title V, based on our understanding of the requirements from the board. So this is a final design. The board has requested that if there is found to be any issues with nitrogen, that we would provide space in our design looking ahead if there was an issue for these tanks, if they were needed. So based on our current analysis and our calculations that we provided to the board, it is not required or not needed at this time.
We don't anticipate it, but we're holding that as a reserve, as maybe a way to put it. I just like to offer where in my area of town, we're getting some heavy weather coming through. So if I suddenly drop off, Mark, you're in charge. If we both drop off. Mr. Martin, did that provide you the information you were looking for?
I do have a few additional questions, if you may indulge me, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, but could I just ask you think maybe we could do them in like say 5 minutes or so?
Most likely, yes. So concerning the grade change for the tanks, and you, Mr. Ventreschi, you indicated that slightly larger pumps would be required. What kind of additional pressure would we be looking at in the forced returns to the leach field now that you are such a high distance away, and what type of considerations would that be for the pipe design?
So the Schedule 40 PVC pipes are rated for 150 psi. So that's a significant amount of pressure. Typically for these are low dose systems, and so you're looking, 25, 35 psi. There's at most. There's there's a factor of safety in this design and on pipes that the pipes far exceed any pressure that would be placed on this design.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a comment about the tanks themselves, that you did indicate that the tanks would be elongated and in order to fit into this area. I do have a concern about this, having firsthand experience with the property in that area in 2 areas. Is that while you have stated you are going to be raising the grade there, which I would imagine is permissible since it's not within the wetland buffer zone, it is currently in the AE flood zone. It is my belief from what I've read, and certainly what we've received from banks, is that the flood zone has actually changed since 1988 significantly, in so much that the Army Corps of Engineers reevaluated, instead of on the normal 20-year cycle from 2010, they actually reevaluated again in 2014. And in that 1988 to 2014 period, the flood zone has expanded 50 to 75 feet in this area westward. So I would be, while you are saying that you're raising it 4 feet, I would be highly concerned about what implications there would be to have this amount of sewage subject to a flooding event, as well as the fact that tanks like these, particularly if they're now elongated, are going to be more subject to buoyancy with groundwater, which may also be having lived there and seen what happens in the spring and summer times and how saturated the land is. I would be quite concerned about shifts in the tanks and or the pipes in this area causing breaks.
So based on we go by the FEMA maps that we currently have that are the most current, which is what we're using for this site. So based on those elevations, based on our work with conservation, where we provided compensatory storage for areas that were filling in the bordering land subject to flooding or BLSF, we are in compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act. In addition, we're providing, as you had mentioned, we're raising the tanks up. We're providing the appropriate cover over the tanks. We're raising the tanks above the estimated seasonal high groundwater, which minimizes or reduces the buoyancy. But I will say that, as part of this project and part of any project that we do, we request buoyancy calculations from the manufacturer. And if it's found that for whatever reason that there's the tanks would be buoyant, and we look at these in a conservative manner as if the tanks were empty and the groundwater is at a much higher elevation than what's based on the site, that we would provide additional weight to make sure that those tanks do not lift after they've been installed.
Such as a concrete block underneath the tanks that they would be attached to?
Concrete block in the tank, it would be attached to, it's called the dead man, or there could be concrete poured on top of it if needed. There's various ways of doing it. The tanks could be tied together and concrete poured between them, so it's one massive block of concrete. And so these are calculations that the board has requested. We will provide those to the board for review and comment when we have those calculations.
Thank you, Mr. Ventresca.
Sure.
And just one last comment. I do take an issue with the statement that Ms. Grandstaff made about the current system being Zone 3. That may be the case, but this is not the case of a replacement system. This is the case of a new system, which is significantly larger than the existing system in the area. While it may be better designed, let's not lose sight of the fact that this building is 3 to 4 times the size of what is currently there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may say, based on the current population of the school and the flow rate that's required under Title V, we're talking for just this Gates School itself, which is where we are, we're talking about 5,500 gallons per day. The new school would be, if we were allowed to use the flow variance, would be about 6,600 gallons, but we've decided we agreed upon that we're going to use just under 8,000 gallons. Based on 6 gallons per person per day. And so what we're doing, if you look at both the gates on the site, Douglas across the way, if you combine both flows that go into this wetland, it's greater than what would be in the combined school currently. And so we're providing a newer system that's in compliance with Title V. We're providing a system where the SAS field is in a Zone 4, raised approximately 5+ feet at least above estimated seasonal high groundwater. The existing SAS field for the Gate School is in the back in that field there, which is probably inundated during the springtime in groundwater. And also that the entire system, tanks and SAS field, are in Zone 3. So the new school is providing is less flows overall between both schools, and is improving the situation by moving the SAS field into a Zone 4 and raised above estimated seasonal high groundwater, which includes the mounding height, which I'm fairly certain that the current school, Gate School, on the site does not take into account any groundwater mounding. So again, this is an improved condition from what's currently there on the site.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Andreska. I mean, sure. I believe the board has done their best to try to weigh both the pros and the cons. Certainly,
absolutely.
Some of the things you mentioned are pluses. There are some minuses that we had to consider as well. But on the balance, Cheryl, are there any other people requesting an opportunity to speak?
No, there isn't.
Very good. In that case, so on the balance, I guess it is time for the board to decide which way that balance goes. So we have a motion made and seconded. And let's see, I will start at the top of the list in front of me. That is Dr. Taylor. How do you
Yes,
vote, sir?
I vote aye to confirm.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Cruz.
Hi, Bill. When the town voted to not expand the sewer system, they assumed the costs associated with the septic field. So for me, there's tacit understanding by the town that they would assume additional costs for to build the system that we approved. So I'm going to vote nay.
Very good. Mr. Conaby.
With hesitation, I vote yes.
Very good. Ms. Becerra.
I also vote aye.
Thank you. And I will also vote aye. So motion passes 4-1. Thank you all. I know I did sort of say this at the beginning, but I'll just say it again. These are the decisions that are not easy because there are many, many competing variables. And, we just have to use our best judgment. And I appreciate all of you applying your best judgment. Hopefully we've reached the right conclusion. Only time will tell, I guess. With that, let's move to the next agenda item. Cheryl, it's disappeared. I think it's the minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
No, actually, we had placed.
Oh, the water district. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. See, I can remember some things occasionally. So I'll just offer the comments on this, although Cheryl might be able to fill in some details. We had suggested that perhaps a joint meeting with the water district so that we could have a full discussion with them and not run afoul of the open meeting law would be a good idea. Cheryl has proposed that. The water district is not opposed to that. They're quite willing to meet with the board, but they are feeling a little fatigued from responding to this particular issue, and they were wondering if we might be able to have some flexibility. What they had suggested is that perhaps they could join one of our already existing meetings for a short period of time, or we could have a non-quorum number of board representatives attend one of their meetings as two options. Or I think they'd also proposed if we really wanted a joint meeting, they proposed Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Did I get it right, Cheryl?
You did.
Okay. So really what, I was suggested to Cheryl is rather than, arbitrarily pick one, I think board members have different levels of interest in this discussion. And I just asked, what would people like to do? Would you like to have, the three options, have them say join for the first half hour of one of our regularly scheduled meetings? Would you like, a representative group for the board to go work with the water district, or would you truly like a joint meeting? Although I'll just tell you that particular time might not work for me, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. Any comments, Dr. Jacoby? I see you're unmuted.
Well, I can't do that Wednesday at 5 either. Maybe we can join our regular scheduled meeting and give it some information and we can have a discussion.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Becerra, I see you're also looking.
Yeah, I'd be interested in a joint meeting, and I'm happy, I think it probably works best for us. That Wednesday time doesn't work for me either, but perhaps if they joined us for a portion of one of our regularly scheduled meetings, that would be great. I think there's a lot of public interest in this, and I think, it'd be good for us to have a meeting in the evening where folks can listen in and ask questions.
Okay, very good. I'll just to be fair, and I see Mike, you'd like to make a comment. Just to be fair,
Yeah.
I believe the water district has hosted some informational meetings. So I just want to give a little shout out to them for making an effort. Mike, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I think Chris Allen and his team have done a very good job with managing the water in town. But yeah, there's this PFAS, and I think I'm open to whatever works for the board and the water district. But I'd also like to expand it to some other topics. I asked couple months ago about like what are the water district's COVID planning measures, and at the time it was like everything's great, we've got a plan in place, and then the next thing I know, we have a water ban in place in town because of COVID is impacting routine maintenance at some of the pump sites. So I think we can expand the agenda to see what they're doing with COVID preparedness, and if it is still true that this is impacting maintenance at some of the well sites in town. I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I assume the PFAS is also impacting some of the well sites in town. I understand they've taken one well offline, the one that had the highest PFAS concentrations.
I actually think it's more than that, Bill.
It's more than one?
Yeah, I think based on the brown water that we're getting now, it's probably one that's down. They're pumping a lot of water out of probably West Acton.
Yeah, Christopherson.
Yeah, Bill, I'd like to state that the agenda gets very crammed quickly. I think we just ought to dedicate a meeting to this. We're meeting twice a week. But if we just add it to this kind of meeting like tonight, it's not going to be satisfactory.
Well, I take your point, Dr. Taylor, and I mean, I agree with you that this isn't. Well, we also have to have the water district's acceptance or agreement, and they're saying that they're feeling that they're running out of time or resources, or I heard anecdotally that one of the Matt Mostetler, I think it is saying that he spends 6 hours a day answering emails and phone calls from concerned citizens, and doesn't leave them a lot of time to do other things.
That's been going on with the Acton Nursing Service as well. I mean, in the middle of a pandemic, there are going to be new demands.
Absolutely correct.
But I still think the water issue is an important one. I know, for instance, Nagog Pond, it is belonging to Concord currently, and we're shutting down wells because we can't keep them maintained, as well as the PFAS.
That's a topic of of long-standing discussion. The ownership of Nagog Pond. Yes. Well, let me ask the members. My suggestion then, given what the water district's willingness to support our request and our desire for a full and complete discussion, my suggestion would be, let's offer them or accept their offer to attend one of our meetings, and for as much time as they're willing to be scheduled for. And if we wind up that there's a lot of issues still outstanding at the end of that time, or their willingness to participate, then perhaps they'll see the value in having another follow-on meeting. I think if we insist on having a joint meeting, and this is just my impression, I have no data to back it up. I think if we insist on it, it might be fairly far in the future before they'll be able to accommodate us. And I think it's better to get some information soon rather than full information a long time from now.
Yeah, but it's not wise to separate the contaminants in water that people are drinking from health. And if they want to answer issues, then we'll have to refer them to them.
Dr. Jacoby, I think you're hitting your mic or something. Well, whatever it is, it's pretty loud. If you would, thank you. And I'm sorry, Dr. Taylor. I did hear what you say. I absolutely agree. We can't separate contaminants in water from their health impacts, and we are the Board of Health, and I do believe we have to be involved, and that is what I'm trying to facilitate to the best extent possible. If your preference is that we have a joint meeting, and that's what the majority of the members think, that's what we'll do. But I just want to signal that it might be a while before that happens. And I'm not sure that's the outcome we desire. Mr. Conaby. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Taylor. Please go ahead.
No, that seems acceptable, but they need to understand that we have a joint interest in this. So that I think they need to be able to talk to us about what they're doing and what they see as the potential impacts might be.
Okay. I agree. Mr. Conaby.
Yes, obviously a significant issue. And as far as fielding numerous calls and inquiries from the public, doing it in a public meeting certainly should help that, where more people can provide it in a more timely manner. But it's obviously a critical issue to health, and I think the sooner than later would be best. And it's part of their requirements is their notification and their outreach. So see what you can do to try to facilitate getting the folks together. Like we say, we have lots of meetings, so certainly inviting them would be good. And we can always follow up with a joint meeting. And they had years ago offered to do joint meetings on a periodic basis, and I think that should be reinstituted and looked at. So good luck.
Thank you. Okay, Cheryl, I think we have a consensus, which is, please invite them to attend the next Board of Health meeting that they're available to attend.
Okay.
And we'll make room for them at the beginning of the agenda.
And probably try to make it a light agenda for a change.
Yeah, well, that's not always under our control, as you well know. Okay, I think we've covered that. It brings us to the minutes, which I have to confess I did not get a chance to read. Did anyone have a chance to scrub the minutes and wish to comment on them?
Yes, I read them. They're very complete and comprehensive.
Excellent. Would you?
Yeah, I'd make a motion to approve.
Very good. Does anyone else feel confident? Ms. Becerra?
I second.
Very good. We have a motion made and seconded to approve the minutes as written. Any further comment? Any comment from members of the public?
No.
Okay, didn't expect it, but in that case, I'll go the opposite direction this time. Ms. Becerra, you're first. Please indicate your vote.
Aye.
Mr. Conaby.
Aye.
Mr. Cruz.
Aye.
Dr. Taylor.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So the minutes are approved. And Cheryl, it's, of course, as soon as I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, I do remember I owe you signed minutes going back probably about six meetings. I will try to get to that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. I have one more thing, Bill, to add. I know it's late, but I'll be quick.
Okay.
So just to let you all know, if you saw the Board of Selectmen meeting, we have a celebrity amongst us. Bill McGinnis was nominated by David Martin to be the Volunteer of the Year, and he was chosen. So I wanted to just give a good shout out to Bill for all the hard work he's done. Our records indicate that he's been a member since 1992. So he spent a lot of years, and he's very well deserving of that award. So thank you, Bill.
All right.
Yay!
Bill, the next goal is,
Congratulations. Well done.
yeah,
Thank you.
is for you to get to the meeting on time.
Oh, ouch. I thought you were going to say, and to be able to see my face.
No, on time.
I try. If it was in person, I'd be there for sure. Well, thank you, Cheryl. And thank you, Mr. Martin, for nominating me. That was very kind of you. I understand that you said something in the meeting as part of the nomination. I haven't had a chance to review the minutes of the selectmen meeting yet, but thank you again. I'm very honored. And I would also like to point out that I am not the longest serving member of the board. Just saying, Mr. Garnaby. Oh.
You certainly can be.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, I just want, I'm not going to go into my remarks I made at the meeting, but we really recognize that your control of these meetings and the steady hand you bring during these times, which are much more tumultuous than a normal Board of Health schedule. So we really appreciate that, and you've again served on the committee for the board for a long time. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you. And my renomination, I think, is up in, no, just kidding. I actually don't, I think it's got a years to go. Anyway, well, thank you. And hopefully I would certainly say that it's nothing to do with me. It's everything to do with the board. We have tremendous talent among the members, and we have obviously tremendous interest and passion to do the right thing for the community. So thank you all. Well, Cheryl, have we reached the end of tonight's agenda?
We have.
In that case, we usually have, I think Dr. Taylor, you're usually the person that's most interested in making the motion to adjourn. Would you care to make a motion?
I would. I make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
Very
Second.
good. I was going to say, and the second most. All right. Let's do this by voice vote. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? In that case, it's unanimous. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much again, and we will meet virtually. Well, I will start my computer even earlier next time.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Au revoir.